Hello and welcome to Won the Lot podcast this week. You're Talking Devils, your leading independent Manchester United podcast. I'm Harry from Fan Owned United, season ticket holder in the Stretford End. And today I'm joined with both Peter and Stephen, as per usual. Peter is a football author, an avid United fan. And Stephen's lifelong United fan and has a season ticket in the East Stand at Old Trafford. If you are joining us live on YouTube, please do leave questions and comments. Always happy to have those, and makes the pod obviously a lot more interesting. And if you're watching on the podcast platforms after today, please like and subscribe. Obviously, quite a big day for the club in terms of a decision which was made around Mason Greenwood. I'm sure everyone is aware of a statement came out today at 3:00 where the club announced that they have no intention of reintegrating Greenwood back into the team. This has been going on for 18 months, and I mean, I personally have been pretty clear on not wanting to comment on this point until the club made a clear decision. But now has been made. He will no longer be part of the United first team. I think, Steve, should we start with you? What are your thoughts on that? Do you think it's the right decision for the team, the club?
Yeah, it is the right decision. They've not handled it particularly well, I don't think, the club, but they've come to the right decision. Would that decision have been made if the leaks from the Athletic didn't come out last week, and then all the fan backlash and reaction? Who knows? Whether they would have come to the right decision without hearing about all the fans' dismay. But yeah, I mean, it was a really tricky period of time for the club. Obviously, it's the least ideal thing that could happen, and also for the promise of such a player. At one point I was thinking it couldn't have actually happened to a worse player because of how much promise that he showed. But yeah, it's been done, and the right decision has been made, and hopefully now we just don't need to hear about it anymore. So good riddance.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the most important thing. At least the decision has been made, and we can move forward. I mean, from my perspective, I guess everyone has their own personal moral compass, right? I mean, all supporters are able and to have their own opinion as to what happened. So regardless of the ins and outs of the situation, I mean, everyone has their own opinion, and I'm not going to kind of dissect and go through it in massive amounts of detail. But I think I would have not stopped supporting the club, but would have struggled to continue, I think, to support United, or definitely question it if he stayed on, just because with the kind of with the images and audio etc. that was released, everyone makes their own decision, I guess, at the end of the day, and it would have been very difficult for me personally to kind of continue. I would or think about at least supporting United. I think I'm not the only one. I mean, like I said, I personally haven't commented much on it, but there is a large fan base, which was similar in my views and opinions. I mean, how about yourself, Peter? Do you at the end of the day, the right kind of decision was made by the club? I mean, what was your whole kind of thought process behind what's happened?
Right decision made, but only after they exhausted every other option to bring him back. Like, everyone knows that was the plan, and like, hats off to Athletic and Adam Crafton, and like without that, I don't think they would have tried to reinstate him. And also, whatever high level United person who leaked that information out, good to show, and even from the report, that there was people inside the club who were very, very against it and willing to strike and willing to resign. So it does show, like, I know we like look, obviously the Glazers have like no morals or ethics, and the cronies that hire at the club obviously are similar. But it's good to show, like, good to see that, like, underneath that there are people at United who are like good people and like hardworking and like know what the club's about and have morals and a conscience. And that also like reflected in the majority of fans that you saw outside of like faceless Twitter accounts. Majority of people just said, "Nah, you shouldn't come back." And there is more important things in life than football, and there's more important things to a football club than just winning matches. And I think that's the only way the Glazers saw it, being like, this guy can score goals, he can help us win, or we can get a big transfer fee from whatever. But like at the end of the day, United's a social institution, and it has a responsibility to like a number of stakeholders, like chiefly the fans, women's team, every employee who works at that club. Like they put them all through such a terrible position for all of them to be in. Like people were going to leave their jobs based off this, and it just shows like they've been on about duty of care to Greenwood. What about the duty to care to every other person connected with the football club and every woman? And the fact they even said like that domestic abuse charities were hostile just kind of shows you. And I thought the process from start to finish was a disgrace. And United have just been backed into a corner, like they were at the Super League, like they were with Arnautovic last summer as well. Like that was again firestorm. The club reacted to it, and it does just show you like they don't communicate with. They talked about communicate with the fans after Super League. They've never done it, and you'd also wonder like what PR companies are United hiring that like that's like they just cannot seem to read a room, let alone have morals of their own. So like Stephen said, I think just good riddance and goodbye, and hopefully we never have to talk about him again. But just the last week, very dark week in United's history, and just a dark story all around. Like Stephen said, like it's an academy player, had a lot of promise, and that happens, but I think you just completely disregard the football side of things, and you think, okay, what kind of person do you actually want representing the club? And I think it was very black and white from the start, and as usual, United made an absolute mess of it before eventually coming to the right decision. So I don't think, no credit to United, but I'm just happy he's not playing for us anymore.
Yeah, I guess from my perspective anyway, at least the right decision was kind of made in the end, because I feel if he did stay on, it just would have brought so much kind of negative press to the team itself. Just can you imagine if he came back and was on the bench or even starting away from home? It just that kind of the whole focus would have just been on him, right? And I think that in itself would have just been such a massive distraction that it would have just, we've got enough problems to deal with as it is to get back to being a competitive team, to trying to win titles again. That kind of attention wouldn't have kind of helped at all. But yeah, I agree in some sense in that the way things have been dealt with, not been ideal either. I know that this article obviously came out from The Athletic on Friday about him potentially being reintegrated. There was obviously a huge backlash, and supposedly that's what caused this U-turn. But again, what actually happened, what was the real kind of ins and outs, it's difficult to say. It's difficult to know exactly. Again, I'm not, by no means am I kind of defending the club, but something I did mention before is ultimately he wasn't prosecuted from a legal perspective. And then, I guess the club was in limbo in that they had an employee which in the court, in a legal sense, hadn't done anything wrong. So what do you do with them? So I think that's why potentially it took so long, and typical United kind of took longer than it needed to be, because it obviously ran for 18 months. But yeah, getting a few kind of comments and questions in. Gopal, regular listeners, saying, "Good evening, gents. We're celebrating the club making the right decision for once." He's also said, "Push come to shove in the end." Jayesh said, we don't need any more distractions. We simply need to focus on selling the club transfers on and off the pitch. Sure, you and also he's gone on to say that, do you reckon the pressure from sponsors played a part in the decision? I'll give that one to you, Steve. Do you think it was pushed through by sponsors, or were there other things at play?
I think, yeah, who's to know? There's obviously a hell of a lot of variables that people take into consideration. Sponsors very well may have come into play, but if sponsors are just looking for purely like financial benefit, then probably not. But if they're coming up and speaking to the Richard Arnold, John Murtaugh, all those kind of people, saying that we don't want to be associated with the club if you bring back Greenwood, then that might they may well have taken that into consideration. But I don't think anyone is going public on their stances, especially from a sponsorship kind of point of view. Certainly not that I've seen. But if that is the case, then brilliant, well done to them to relinquish a sponsorship with one of the biggest institutions in the world because of a moral standpoint. You need to be. Some people might need to make that kind of stance in order for people to listen. Obviously, the fans enormous, as was mentioned earlier with the Super League, and then with Arnautovic, and then with this, it's three decisions that have been now U-turned because of fan backlash, and I think the fans have made a massive contribution into this, and that's just really kind of warming that we are willing to sacrifice potential success for the right decision.
Yeah, absolutely. I commend kind of all those groups that came out. I think especially since the Athletic article was released in terms of protesting and the kind of backlash that it got, because I think undoubtedly that did play a factor in the final decision. Kind of going on to the point, I guess Jay mentioned about sponsors. I think Peter touched on it before as well. I mean, we've got so many other stakeholders as well, which are so important and crucial to the club. I mean, first and foremost, the women's team. This topic is so kind of sensitive to that part of the club as well. I guess the club has to do right by everyone. The only the main gripe I have with the club is that it took this time, and I understand why these things can take time. But for me, I think from their perspective, it was kind of, how do we potentially make most of him as an asset? Because undoubtedly, it's no kind of secret. Man United are a massively commercial-based football club, especially in the last 10 years. How do we maximize on profits? How do we maximize on our assets? And I think that most probably was given quite a lot of time and energy behind the scenes as to how we could, potentially capitalize and monetize on Greenwood as an asset, which even now, I mean, anyone can correct me if I'm wrong. From all the statements that have been released from the club from today, I haven't seen anything from United saying that his contract will be terminated. I think the wording is pretty key in that they've said they've agreed for him not to be reintegrated to the first team, which kind of leads me to potentially believe, I wouldn't put it past United, where they could look for an out on either selling him or potentially going on loan. I think the latter option would be particularly kind of catastrophic because he would still be a United player. But I mean, how does that leave? United? They've made a decision that they don't want to put him back into the team. How do you sell a player like that? Because surely, we have no negotiating power. Your thoughts on that, Peter? I mean, what do we do with Greenwood now?
Like you said, everything's commercially driven from the start with United, and for every decision they've made throughout this process. Like Greenwood, in the current market, if he played for the last 2 years, it's a 100 million player. Like, and now they're probably looking at getting whatever for him. But if they had an actual moral compass or conscience at the club, they just write it off, being like, we will take any offer to get this guy off the books, out of the squad, it's just a mess. But no, United, they'll try and loan him out. They'll try and increase his value and then sell him on to someone. And I saw some, I don't know who said on Twitter, being like, oh, it'd be great if we get like some pure profit for FFP. I'm kind of like, who cares about that? Like, there's more important things than that at a football club. But yeah, it's like, and on the sponsors thing, it's weird because I remember last week, like, there was a comment from Adidas being like, we've no influence on this. And they surely would have been briefed that, like, this guy's going to be coming back. He can be wearing your shirt. And they signed a 10-year deal with United, a new one, like 2 weeks ago. Surely that would have been the question that they would have asked. So it's really hard to know who did what. I'd say every sponsor, once they saw the fan backlash, was like, oh, we can't. They jumped on that. Like, I wouldn't give, like, these are all like multi-billion companies. They don't care about, they don't have actual morals or ethics. They just want to be seen to have them. So I'd say the minute that the fans all went up in arms and there was Twitter going off, I'd say every sponsor was like, we cannot be attached to this because we're going to start getting torn down. Like last year, when, quite kind of funnily, the United fans started like Google reviewing TeamViewer at like 0 stars and all this sort of stuff. So there is an impact you can do. And yeah, I'm more like all hail the legacy fans that we were called in 2021. I think the people who actually care about United as a club, as opposed to just the team winning, were the ones who spoke up. And like you said, like all the fan groups that came out, like Rainbow Devils came out, the female, I forget the exact name of the females against Greenwood, the one that was set up recently. And then any supporters group who kind of like stood up for what they believed in and stood up for what they think the club's about. I think you just commend them more than anyone. And yeah, it's just like United 2023, like the day after the women's club captain plays in the World Cup final, and United's women's goalie saves a penalty in the World Cup final, that talk is about this. So yeah, I think try and move past it, but I don't think it's one of those things that's going to be forgotten. Like, I think Richard Arnold is under serious pressure. I think someone has to go after this, because like Ed Woodward resigned after the Super League, and this is as big a fiasco in like a completely different sense. It's like you can't come back from that. Like, you've lost all the trust of the fans. You don't have any, like, there's no leadership shown. You've just made a mess of everything. And like the statement United put out made no sense, and it was just like the weirdest. There was nothing to it. It was basically saying we want to bring him back, but because the fans don't want him back, we're going to pack him in. So there was no context to it. There's no information given, and maybe there's legal reasons for that.
Strange. I was actually
odd.
I was actually listening to, on X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it. They have these sound forums. Now, I was actually listening to one of another kind of a United fan base. And one of the guys on there was saying, reading through half of it, if you didn't know what the outcome was before reading that statement, it kind of sounded like that they were bringing him back.
Just it was they might have edited their original statement from last week about bringing him back, and just said we'll just throw in the line at the end. It was very, very strange.
It was very strange. I guess a win-win situation, which is very optimistic, would be if United end up selling the club with a new owner. They can, restructure what we have in terms of our board management team, and we can start fresh and go from there. Because you're right. I mean, even though it was a difficult situation to deal with, it shouldn't have taken this long, and it just the way things have unravelled just shown United in a kind of terrible light again. But my kind of final piece on it, I'm pretty sure you both as well, want to kind of just finish on this topic as well, is that ultimately the right decision was made. I personally am glad, same as you guys, whether you're season ticket holders, members, ultimately we pour a lot of money into this football club. And if they make decisions which are difficult for you to deal with on a personal level, it makes your choices kind of difficult as well as to how you can properly support the team. So, although ultimately it was not the best way to handle the situation, at least the right decision kind of was made. Anything you guys want to talk about on this before we move on to Spurs? We're done.
I'm done with it.
Yeah, I'm goodbye. I'm goodbye. Good riddance to Greenwood. But the only thing I would say, United, our transfer plans this summer are definitely based on him coming back. And now it's like, we'll probably need another forward. And I can also see United, like we did last August after the terrible start of the season, got Casemiro and Anthony. I can see them hitting the panic button, and I could see us signing a player or two in the next week just to change the narrative around the club and to change the news feed. So, expecting something to happen.
Yeah, to be honest, from my perspective, there are more things important than football. There's talk that his contract's worth $7 million to buy him out and to terminate it. I think that's the best thing, to be honest. I mean, we can be scrapping around trying to get a fee for him, but we made a decision. We don't want him back in the first team, and then the board should really stick to that. And that's my last kind of 2 pennies worth on the topic. Right. So moving forward, unfortunate defeat on Saturday. Steve, we lost on Saturday for a change.
The first chance we get, right?
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, from my perspective, in terms of a performance, the first 30, 35 minutes weren't so bad, but after that point, we seemed to just capitulate. Really, the start of the second half just seemed like we were still in the dressing room. Spurs came at us, really just ripped our defense in pieces, and just we were never in the game after that point. If I look at it, it's almost like you could have cut the field down in two to separate our two teams. We had the goalkeeper, the 4 defenders, and Casemiro, and then they were detached from the other half of the team, which was Mount, Fernandes, Garnacho, Rashford, and Anthony. No cohesion between the two units, and we just really looked poor, especially defending at times. Peter, we'll start with you. I mean, what were your overall thoughts on the game?
You kind of summed it up there. Yeah, it was awful. It felt very like last season. It kind of felt like a continuation of away from home. We don't score the first goal. It kind of felt like that they lost like confidence in themselves to score a goal, and then the minute Spurs scored, again panic button, and like we lost all shape. There was no pattern. It was everyone just kind of playing hero ball, and it didn't feel like we were ever gonna. I know we hit the post with Anthony, but it just didn't really feel like we were going to score, and it just had that feeling of their fans are up, they've their new manager, whatever. It's the first home game. We've capitulated. We've just bottled it, and the only positive from that game was Onana. His passing was good, but everything else, like Rashford, I don't get how Sancho was trialled as a false 9 all summer, and Rashford's our best attacker. I keep him in his right position and work around from there. Like Anthony and Garnacho both been really poor to start the season. The midfield, I don't think like Mason Mount getting a lot of flack, but it's a little bit like, well, that Ten Hag did buy him to put him in that midfield 3. I wouldn't be binning him off instantly. Other issues like the Luke Shaw like inverted left back thing. Not a fan of it. Like for their first goal, there was just a massive gaping gap on their side. And Garnacho, I know he's a young fella and all. Like I wouldn't give him too much stick. Wasn't really tracking back. And then Shaw was kind of just like casually like walking toward. He was inviting him to cross. So it was just really strange. And then the left hand side was our best. Like last season, it was our best side of attack, like Shaw and Rashford. And then you got Rashford up top, and you've got Shaw like in like a weird like pivot with Casemiro. So I know he's probably trying to change the system around a bit, but yeah. And like I said, like it felt like we were in the change room. I kind of feel like we're still in pre-season. It's like we've had a full pre-season with these players, and everyone just seems really undercooked. There seems like there's like a lack of energy, or it just feels all off. So 2 games in, so I'm not going to panic too much, but you'd expect a response anyway.
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, look, it's not ultimate kind of panic stations. One thing I was really surprised about is, again, I know some of these guys on social media just it's crazy sometimes what they come out with. I mean, I've heard some outlets talking about how it's time for Ten Hag to go, and he's 3 or 4 games away from being axed and all this rubbish. And it's just like, okay, everyone needs to chill out. We've not had the best start, but I don't think we're at a stage where we're calling for Ten Hag's head. Because he has made so much progress since he's joined United. But yeah, Steve. I mean, obviously a lot of things to work on, a lot of weaknesses. I mean, we talked about potential changes and starting Sancho last week, as in we thought he might start Sancho instead of Garnacho. Apart from that, were you surprised that he went with the same starting 11 as Wolves, considering we weren't the best against Wolves either?
I wasn't surprised because I think outside of Højlund, you'd imagine that that's arguably our best team on paper. So, I mean, I've not even seen Højlund play, so I don't even know if that's our best team on paper. But yeah, I mean, I think if you start in the season, you're asking every United fan who their preferred centre-back partnerships would be, the preferred left-back. I think everyone's got an opinion on whether or not Dalot or Wan-Bissaka is their preferred right-back. Maybe it's game-by-game context, but, I think everyone would be wanting Bruno, Casemiro and Mount because we've just paid 60 million quid for him, with Rashford on the left, Anthony on the right, and then Højlund up front. So there's one member in that team, or maybe 2 if you count in the right back, that isn't our full strength 11, and we've just been absolutely outplayed again. I wasn't surprised to see the same team, but I'd be very surprised to see the same team next week. I think, agreeing with your points about the first goal, Luke Shaw has started the season absolutely terribly. Maybe it's because he's been played out of position a little bit, but their first goal came from the left-hand side. From our left back not being in position. Their second goal came from the right-hand side and our right back not being in position. So that's clearly something that we need to do defensively. We had 3 shots on target out of 14, I think, at one point. Where what's going on there? Rashford and Bruno. I know Rashford was offside for his header. Bruno missed an absolute sitter. Anthony hitting the post from where he did shouldn't really have happened. There's a hell of a lot going wrong with that team. They all look knackered. They look absolutely knackered for whatever reason. I don't know, but we're getting dominated in midfield, absolutely dominated by a 20-year-old and then someone who couldn't get into Tottenham's team last season in Bissouma. So I don't know what's going on there, but something needs to change big time.
Yeah, I mean, what was really frustrating was to see their midfield against ours. So Bissouma and Maddison looked like elite players versus...
Yeah, again, we spoke about it last week. Mateus Cunha looking like Kaká. How can you make someone who's that level of skill look like someone so much higher level of skill? They do it every week. And, you're thinking that game... I don't know if anyone watched Villa versus Everton yesterday. Everton would give us a game.
Jesus. That's saying a lot. You'd like it. Just is weird because there has to be questions asked there. Like, you had a full preseason, like we had all, and the signings came in relatively early. I know, like Højlund, but we knew Højlund was joining with an injury anyway. So, and I didn't expect Højlund to be starting right away anyway. I thought they'd play Rashford at the top or Sancho. So it is just a bit strange. Like, Mount came in late June. Onana got a good few games of preseason. He played the full team against Lons at home.
Mm-hmm.
I know every Irish person was raging they played the B team in Dublin, and it was bad out, but that's another issue with United. But it just is really strange. Like, I kind of expect us to fly out of the blocks. I thought, like, okay, the players know the system now. They're going to be good to go. Like last season, there was a lot of mitigating factors, like the Ronaldo situation. We hadn't signed Casemiro and Anthony. Ericsson was a false 9. There was a lot going on. But then on the other side, I'm like, okay, like, fair enough. Last season started terribly as well. Maybe it takes a few games and then Ten Hag did switch things up a bit after those first 2 games. Maybe it just takes him a couple of games to get into rhythm. I also think that's the same story with Casemiro.
Yeah.
Like, when he came in last season, he looked a little bit off the pace, and he's got a run of games. And the suspensions last season, whenever he came back, he looked a bit rusty. I think he just is one of those players who needs to get into, like, playing consistently all the time. I think people writing off Casemiro, like, after a game or two. Like Jamie Carragher had an article about him, and yeah, if we know we didn't sign Casemiro for 10 seasons, but like it just is a bit like with United it always is like it's always somewhere in the middle because people act like you're saying there, Harry, like sack Ten Hag. You're like, we've done this the last 10 years, just like sack a manager, change a manager. You need to relax. We just need to relax a little bit. But like I said, I would expect changes for Forest. I wouldn't change Mount because what was the point of signing him if you're not going to give him a run? Palestra, I think, should play just like you have to give that guy a chance or just get rid of him, and then play Sancho false nine and go Rashford on the left.
Yeah, I was actually going to say that as well. Palestra on the right, Sancho in the middle, and Rashford on the left against Forest. That's what I'd do.
Yeah, and you have if you
around Palestri, I mean, I don't know. Seems like Ten Hag. He doesn't really play him too much. Even last season, he brought him on now and then, but I just can't see Ten Hag, for whatever reason, starting him just because he hasn't done so historically. But you're right. I mean, Anthony showed bursts in the first half of going forward, but you know, I mean, he had that shot as well, which hit the post as well. But apart from that, there wasn't loads from him. Casey, thanks for joining the show. He just put out a little statement on YouTube. He's saying that feels like we went into this assuming we could take more risks with them having no Kane. What's weird is that we've yet to play any of the systems formations that we used in pre-season. Yeah, again, pretty interesting. Obviously, Ten Hag was quite keen on playing Sancho as a false nine in pre-season, which at times he played pretty well, especially against Arsenal in the pre-season game. But he hasn't done so far in the league. One thing you mentioned, Peter, which I think is spot on. I mean, Casemiro, I think is getting so much stick at the moment, which is, I personally think, completely off the mark. I think he unfortunately is one of the victims of a poor team performance. I mean, in both games, especially against Tottenham away, you know that they're going to come and attack you. You know that they're going to be quick on a counter-attack. Mount and Fernandes, just like the Wolves game, were both pressing incredibly, high up the pitch, that he was just trying to cover 2-3 players at the same time. And it doesn't matter how good you are as a defensive central midfield player, 4 against 1 just doesn't go. I think on top of that, there were a lot of times where Varane and Wan-Bissaka kind of looked a bit lost when they were tracking back, covering players, marking players, especially in the second half. It looked kind of very much amateurish in terms of, losing men, not following them, letting Spurs have loads of space. I mean, on that point, Steve, about the middle three, what do you think needs to change for us to improve against Forest? I mean, what change needs to be made? Because ultimately, Mount, we paid 60 million for him. I doubt he's going to be dropped so soon into the season. So him and Bruno are there to stay.
Yeah, I'd stop the high press quite soon, because I don't think Rashford and Garnacho have been doing it. I think Anthony does quite well out of possession, but I think if you got a full press, you need every member of your press to actually press. Rashford was a mannequin in that game. I know he doesn't like being up front on his own, but he's on 300 grand a week. He needs to touch the ball. Show yourself and try and get in positions. He just, I was really disappointed with Rashford the other day. But also, I think with the high press, and if we're not winning it back, then it's so hard to get back for all of these players. And obviously that's why Casemiro has looked quite isolated. But Mason Mount had like 25 touches in that game. And that's just not on for a centre mid. I think Eriksen came on and had 22 in 25 minutes. So, stop the high press, get your midfield in midfield rather than up front. If you're going to press, have the forwards pressing, the 3 forwards pressing in one unit, and then if they play out on that, then you've got 3 midfielders, and then your defence to come and cover. You know, you've not just got Casemiro, who's looked like he's struggling, but yeah, I just think you've got it's all or nothing with a press, and if 2 out of your 5 aren't pressing, what can you do?
I was really surprised at the beginning of the game how high Fernandes was pressing. I don't know if you noticed, he was pressing even further up the pitch than Rashford. I mean, surely if you want a player pressing that high, like you said, you go with your striker.
Everyone was pressing more than Rashford, though. Everyone. Garnacho was, Anthony was, Luke Shaw was.
Yeah, I know. But just in terms of how far up the pitch you want Bruno, I mean, there were points where he was in and around their penalty box, you know, which fine, it works if you manage to get the ball back. But if they get it past you, you're obviously leaving massive gaps in the middle of the park. And personally, I think between the two, out of Mount and Bruno, in terms of scoring goals, I would actually let Mount play slightly more ahead of Bruno. Bruno, I think, is changing into a bit more of a player where his passing is fantastic. I think that's his main attribute, long balls especially. And I personally think a fix is, if you are going to play those three, is that Bruno needs to play deeper. We can't carry on just letting Casemiro try to deal, you know, with the defense of the midfield like on his own, and just see if it works and hope that it sticks, because from the first 2 games it's clear that it's not working. What do you think about that, Peter? Do you think Bruno sitting a bit deeper is a key, or what would need to change?
Yeah. I actually said this to someone before the Spurs game, that if we're going to play that, remember, like towards the end of last season, I think it was when Casemiro was suspended, one of like the 5 times he was, Bruno was playing much deeper, and he was good. And like, he was picking out passes, and he wasn't playing Hollywood balls, and he wasn't running around like a headless chicken. He was like dictating the play, and there was runners, and he was picking them, whatever. And like, he's a better passer of the ball than Mason Mount, but Mount is a better presser than him. So I'm kind of like, you get Mount leading. Mount can play like more of a 10, and he can whatever. I think that would make more sense. And then you both made the points that kind of line up. Harry, you were saying like the team was like you cut down the middle. It was like a 5 and a 5 outfield. And then you were saying like about if everyone's not pressing, then there's no point in pressing, because you can just pass it around them. So like, it needs to be like the team works as one. The team moves up the pitch as one. The team moves back as one. The team presses as one, and you make the pitch small. Whereas we're like, half the lads are pressing, and there's just this massive like an ocean in the middle, and Casemiro standing there on his own. So it has to work in conjunction. And I think Ten Hag's kind of trying to like mimic how Klopp was with like Liverpool, of like, we all press, but like Firmino was the first defender. He was the guy who led the press from the very front. And as you said, like, Rashford doesn't do that. And there's no excuse for Rashford not doing that. And I hate the way like people are like, oh, Rashford doesn't like playing up top. I'm like, so what? Like, we give out about Kylian Mbappe saying he didn't want to play up top. Like, he's a way better player than Rashford is. And also, like you said, you're on big money. You do like work. You do a job for the team. Like, it's a couple of games. Like, put a shift in. So that's an issue. And like, Højlund seems like a serious athlete. So maybe like when he comes back in, it'll be him leading the press. But it all just feels very disjointed at the moment, and a very like un-Ten Hag, because he's very meticulous in his preparation. It's kind of feeling a bit like Ollie football, where it's like, go on, lads, go out and have a run around, and like, we'll see if we can score more than them. So yeah, I do think he'll work on it, and I think that playing the same team like he did for the first 2 games, a lot of the times Ten Hag does it after a bad performance. He's like, let's see if he can respond, and like, I think he will make changes now. And we're lucky that Forest are the worst away team in the league last season. They won 1 game, and barring, you could see an Elanga like winner or something, just would be classic. But it really should be a game that we're like, we can afford to play Mason Mount, give him minutes, give him a run. Let's try and work on this system, and you know, like, just for like, move past Spurs game. Don't freak out, and don't start saying, we were all saying Eriksen was past it a week ago, and now it's like Eriksen's like the answer. So as always, it's somewhere in the middle. And I do think he must have like earmarked a pretty big role for Kobe Mainoo, if like with this system or how he wants to play. So yeah, I think they have to sign someone in the next week or two in midfield just to bulk it up and a bit more physicality. But
yeah. I
I'm
mean,
like, just
obviously there
again, I'm
were,
just like, let's not freak out because that
yeah.
as United fans, we're just prone to doing that post Fergie.
Yeah. I mean, obviously there was issues all over the pitch against Spurs, but you mentioned Rashford there. I mean, Steve, there's an argument that he's got his new contract, 300k plus a week, that maybe he's resting on his laurels a bit. I mean, do you think that's a valid point, or
If it is a valid point, then we should sell him, because I think if you have a third of a good season, or if you have the best season that you've ever had for a club, get your big contracts and then don't work anymore, then that's complacency. You can't be complacent at a big club. You just can't. So we've all moaned at Ronaldo when he walks around and throws his arms up in the air and doesn't run, doesn't walk, and doesn't press. Rashford last game didn't do that. He didn't win a header. He didn't win a duel. He didn't beat players. He didn't run in behind. He didn't press. He had an absolute. He was a 2 out of 10 last week, and that's just not what you need from the guy you just give a 300 grand a week contract to, or more. I don't think we still don't know.
On Rashford, like, again, it's 2 games of the season. I'm like, let's just wait a bit before he. I also, like, I hate the United fans who, like, we're not like, I know none of us are doing it, but like, Rashford, like, sell him, he's useless, blah blah. And he gets a lot of stick, and in line with what we talked about at the start, Rashford is someone that you're like, yeah, you're a good guy, like you represent the club a lot in the good ways. So I'm kind of like, let's just stick with him, and like, let's hope he improves, and hopefully they also kick up the backside after Spurs, because I fully thought after Wolves, a part of me was like, maybe it's good that we played badly and we won, because Ten Hag will rip into them and they'll be coming out Spurs. But it just felt like like that comment that came in a bit, like, did we take Spurs a bit lightly without Kane? That maybe there was that feeling. I thought it was like, this is a fantastic opportunity for us to, like, right the wrongs from last season and get the away form off and running from the start, get a big away win, and like just kick on. And now our next away game's at Arsenal, and you're like, geez, if we're starting the season with 2 losses at, like, supposed, like, other big clubs and rivals, it just is like, that's a mentality issue. If you can only play well at home, like Roy Keane touched on it, and I know he is prone to, like, going, he's very hyperbolic, but it is true. Like, you do really prove yourself away from home. Can you play in front of that big atmosphere? Can you respond? And judging from what we've seen so far, we can't. But again, 2 games in, so
yeah. I
we'll
mean,
relax a
like I
bit in it.
said, it wasn't just Rashford; it was all across the pitch. I think the biggest gripe that I have United are not going to win every single game, but the biggest gripe I have is when we lose, when there's just a bit of lack of effort and lack of cohesion. I think definitely in that second half, we didn't have a plan, which was really frustrating to watch. And secondly, just, I don't know, we just looked like really defeatist after we conceded that first goal. We didn't have the fight, didn't have, the
Playing against 12
ambition.
men, though, weren't we, again?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I guess we haven't even talked about the penalty appeal, which obviously, didn't get any spotlight after the game, really. I mean,
Nope.
Sky Sports hardly spoke about it, even though they went on about Onana's penalty shout the week before for about 4 days. But yeah, I mean, that didn't help either. I mean, how that wasn't a penalty. I mean, I know they said it was, he was close to the ball, but I personally thought that the rule was, your body, your arm can't be in an unnatural position. His arm was above his shoulder and away from his body, which
It all makes no sense.
They gave a pen in the Women's World Cup final for almost the exact same thing, didn't they? So
yeah. I am a little bit like, and it's actually good we haven't discussed the penalty, because that's not why we lost. We lost because of all the things we talked about, like the lack of effort, the lack of plan,
yeah,
X, Y, Z.
absolutely.
And
absolutely.
we should and like, like, we're not playing, like, it wasn't Man City away. Like, we should be beating Spurs without Harry Kane, and they have a load of new players in as well. Like, they are just betting in. So yeah, and also I think at this point, kind of like, no one can rely on the ref for anything anymore. So you kind of need to play in spite of poor refereeing. And we got away with one against Wolves. Like, Onana, like, clothesline the lads. But then again, like, Spurs had one last week against Brentford, and there's no one knows the rules anymore. And we're all kind of just, I don't know, like, yeah, just make up as we go.
Also, why can't Bruno talk to the ref? The ref booked Bruno for talking to him. Like, he's the captain. If anyone can talk to the ref, it should be the captain.
I did think as well.
Bruno says is he books him. What's
Bruno, like, he's just not liked. He's like a very irritating player. But the ref shouldn't be thinking like that, especially for a captain. But like the media reaction to Bruno after the game, like well-respected journalists were kind of cutting up comments, being like, "That's not what he said. Like, he took responsibility for his miss. Like, he said, I should have scored." He wasn't saying like we only lost because of the referee. He was dead right to say like I should be able to talk to the referee. Like that's I don't see any problem with that. But then they just forgot all the other things he said about we didn't play well, we should be better, and they just like kind of positioning and painting Bruno as this like terrible captain. Then you listen to everyone he's ever played with, and they're like, he's really good around the dressing room, all these sort of things. So I wouldn't pay too much attention to the perception of Bruno because no one likes him. Like most United, like Bar United fans, absolutely no one has any time for him.
That ball he played to Rashford, the Rabona, the little cross. I screamed. I watched it in the pub and I actually screamed. It was great.
I watched at a mate's birthday party. He was a big United fan, and he booked it ages ago. He didn't realise that it was on TV, and it was just off phone and like 10 lads surrounding it, just like, God, this is so bad. I was just like, the season's back anyway.
Yeah, that Rabona though, Steve, that was something, wasn't it? I think he was offside in the end, but
he was offside, Rashford.
Just for him to try it was something special. But yeah, I mean, don't need to go into massive details, but the chances as well, thinking about it now, Rashford at that header, he just looked confused as to the fact that it hit him on his head. Bruno had that clear-cut chance. I think Casemiro made the best of his header, to be fair. I don't think there's too much more he could have done, but I mean, there's just 3 goals just there. Anthony, as I mentioned before, had a great shot, which could have gone in on another day. So it was frustrating. We just couldn't put these chances away. I mean, from my perspective, we just need to get Højlund in ASAP, and have someone who's an out-and-out goal scorer.
One thing I do want to just bring up again, sorry, with just regards to that penalty. I'm not going to talk about the penalty. I'm going to talk about the reaction. Like last week we talked about the Dermot Gallagher saying that it was all day a penalty, and then the same last season for Wolves, it should never be a penalty. He's done the same again this week. So for United, he was like correct decision, absolutely correct decision, agrees with the decision to not award the handball. And then last season there was one in the I think it was a Villa game last year against Arsenal that when the player's out on his own, when there's no one around him, that's what he bases his decision on when a penalty gets given for handball. It's just like the media narrative, it's out of the world.
It's a Peter Walton school of thought on refereeing. You're kind of like, how are you guys? I don't think they even know the rules anymore. And like we all know, like if you say something about United, you're going to get more clicks and engagement, and it's always a bigger talking point. But that's part and parcel of playing for Man United.
Another week, and the United agenda lives on.
I know.
Maybe we should rename the pod.
Yeah, exactly. So, well, look, I think it'll be interesting to see what Ten Hag does on the weekend. I mean, I think he definitely needs to make some sort of change, whether it's personnel-wise or in the way we set up and we play. I think that midfield is a definite area we need to work on. Just before we go, the last point I wanted to mention, there's been murmurs, not from solid media outlets, but a few mentioning that Varane may be going to Saudi Arabia. If negotiations are ongoing and some money was put on the table, I mean, what do you guys think? Would you be happy for him to go? I mean, me personally, I think it's way too late in the window now. I don't think we could replace him, regardless of if we get 70. Well, there was rumours of 50 million, which I think is way undervalued for the quality of player he is. But even if we get 60, 70 million for him, we just aren't going to be able to replace him. Surely that would be, catastrophic, Steve, no?
Yeah, it would. We wouldn't be able to replace him. Lindelof although he's a good deputy, probably for me, in my opinion, isn't good enough to start game like week in, week out for United. Harry Maguire also isn't good enough to be the first sub. So yeah, I think if there's what is there now 9-10 days left of the transfer window. If anything happens, then we can't replace him. We're going to need a full window to replace Varane. And maybe I saw the rumours of him wanting one more year in Europe, and I think that's absolutely fair. If we can get like kind of 40-50 million next summer when he's 31 going on 32, then as long as we've got a plan to get someone young and hungry and physical and quick with some real ball playing capabilities, then absolutely. But to cobble together someone in the last 5 minutes of the transfer window, it's really not on, because we were looking at Maguire leaving and then thinking of Pavard, and I still don't think that was the best option anyway. So yeah, I'd try and reject as many offers as we can, unless they reach kind of 100 million or whatever. But that's obviously not going to happen.
Yeah. I echo what Steve's saying. This, like, you can't be selling your starting centre back 2 games into the season, and also he's been the only defender so far that hasn't looked like completely lost. So I don't think he would go either. I think he wants to do something. He seems to care a lot. The only issue would be like what he's talked a lot about, like we're playing too many games and all the stuff. But I don't think he'll go. And like Steve said, the market's really bad for centre backs at the moment. There's no one really there. Like if we knew Varane was leaving, like, let's go for Kim.
We would have, we would have gone for Kim. Yeah, absolutely. And that's what you can't be doing that. And I'd be surprised as well. I think he wants to win something of like importance at United, and yeah, I think we'll be all right there. But Jesus, like the way the last 2 weeks have been going, you wouldn't really rule out anything now for the next 10 days.
You never know. That's the problem. You never know with United. Casey, you're saying I preferred some French style running on Saturday. Even some Zedro shots would have been fine. Come to think of it, can we re-sign him? I mean, sometimes he was great, sometimes he wasn't. Re-signing Fred, I'm not sure. I don't know if we're that desperate at the moment, Casey. And he also said if we got Kim, fine, but we sadly didn't, so we can't lose Varane. 100% agree there. So yeah, guys, I think that is it for us this week. We'll be back next Monday, going over the Forest result. Hopefully it's a positive one, and all in all will be more upbeat and more positive to talk about, we hope anyway. But thank you everyone who joined us with all the questions, comments. Really appreciate them. As mentioned, if you are listening on the pod platforms after the show, do like and subscribe as well. But yeah, I've been Harry from Fan United with Steve and Peter, and we'll join you next week. Take care.